So that anti-Semitic spirit also visited us as the indigenous people, and we don't condone it and do not like it. As a survivor of the Indian
That's what it sounded like a little over 2 weeks ago on the steps of Vancouver's Schara Tzedeck Synagogue, when members of the Indigenous Coalition for Israel, including Grand Chief Linda Prince from British Columbia, paid a visit to the shul. It was a show of solidarity after someone set the front doors of the historic Orthodox synagogue on fire. You could also hear Schara Tzedeck's rabbi, Andrew Rosenblatt, thanking her for their visit.
I want to thank you and the entire group for your advocacy and for your support and for coming to visit us. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
It was a bit of comfort for the community after a suspect poured something flammable on the outside ornate metal doors on Thursday night, May 30th, while people were still inside the building having a meeting. A passerby spotted the fire, sounded the alarm, and someone from the shul came out and doused the fire with his jacket, leaving behind the smell of smoke and black burn marks on the door. No one was hurt. Vancouver police said their major crime division is still investigating it, but they have no updates. This week, a police squad car was parked outside the Schara Tzedeck when our photographer visited on Monday to take some new photos, but she didn't see any police officers actually in the vehicle or anywhere in the near vicinity. Still, Schara Tzedeck has decided to keep the police tape up for now and also to leave the damaged door as is, complete with the black scorch marks, as a very visible public reminder.
The truth of the matter is, I would hate to really make too much out of somebody else's pitiful ignorance. I don't know what other word to use for it, but raw hatred, pitiful ignorance, maybe all of that wrapped into one. But it is a reminder that we are now another place that has experienced something like this.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit.
I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at the cjn.ca/NTKR or wherever you get your podcasts.
Schara Tzedeck Synagogue is conducting a safety audit this week of the building in preparation for applying for more funding from the federal government. Ottawa has a special fast-track program that helps pay for some security equipment and possibly guards when a place of worship has been the subject of a hate-motivated attack. The synagogue did get some federal funding 6 years ago, $10,000 in 2018, to install a closed-circuit security camera system. Vancouver police are using these images to try to identify the lone suspect who had their face covered. The shul also installed decorative boulders strategically outside to prevent ramming attacks, which have never happened. But Rabbi Rosenblatt says he doesn't want this new anti-Semitism to define how Jews in Vancouver live their lives. He joins me now from his office in Vancouver.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm sorry that we have to meet this way instead of on a better news, but I wanted to...
That would be nice.
I wanted to speak with you a couple of days since your synagogue was in the news. So before we go any further, I guess I should ask, what is the latest, sort of the investigation, the latest, any news?
Yeah, I spoke with VPD. They didn't have anything
Vancouver
new
Police,
to
yeah.
report. They assigned us to the Major Crimes Unit, and they've really put a lot of resources towards it. We don't have anything new, but I can tell you I know what they've been canvassing. Around the shul is a residential neighborhood, and in residential neighborhoods there are Teslas and there are Ring doorbells and Blinks and Nests and all sorts of other security systems, and they're knocking door to door in hopes that this individual who had his face covered will have uncovered his face at some point or given away some other identifying detail. Police told me that they are working on it around the clock, and they have nothing new to report in terms of detail. But the police did come and help us do a little bit a deeper assessment of how we can keep our buildings safe without having to put up an iron fence.
Okay, well, what would that look like? Can you tell us a little bit of their advice?
It's mostly about lighting and other kinds of things that will let a would-be assailant know that they're being seen by multiple angles. There are also certain kinds of cameras that you can put around that are movable, that if you do cycle them a little bit, it's much harder for you to be scoped out. Those kinds of things are what we're really looking at. But the truth of the matter is, as far as the leadership of the community feels, is it's not where Canada wants to be turn everything into a police state and a surveillance state in order to keep order. You know, the joke I tell Israelis about what Canada can teach them, because if you've ever been in Israel and the bus comes at 5:30 and everybody's running to get their kids from Gan, you know, it's a mad rush. I can't speak for Eastern Canada, but out here in Western Canada, everybody lines up very nicely and they look at each other. Did I get here first? Did you get here first? And I think that's part of the charm of Canada, is that we are a safe and respectful place. It is a place where you can do business. It's a place where you can thrive as a minority. That is, I think, what is being threatened here by what's going on. In our davening this Shabbos, we had the premier, David Eby, a number of other ministers, Mike Farnworth, Talib Nur Mohammed, our
Member of Parliament,
MP. And I'm told there were even a couple of other clergy from other faiths. And I spoke about, for Jewish listeners who know the story of Kamtzu Bar Kamtza, this is the story of what happens when the rabbis don't speak up when someone's being abused. And we talked about that idea, what happens when you don't speak up when you need to. And then I said, if somebody can shout in the middle of Vancouver streets, "Long live October the 7th," then you have to understand that those words are very, very charged. The naive person might think that it just means a call to stand with the Palestinian independence movement. But when you say that, don't be surprised that people actually take that somewhat seriously. Globalize the Intifada is really a call to globalize violence. The premier was there. We had a meeting after with them, and they heard it. Now, this is our point is this: is if everywhere from the BC Teachers Union to the steps of the public art gallery, that you're screaming this kind of anti-Semitism, you can't be surprised now that people take the signal that maybe, you know, this is okay now in Canada.
Open season on Jews is okay.
Yeah, or at least Premier Eby, to his credit, you know, at least, you know, he came, he sat through, 2.5 hour,
3 hour services.
Yeah, exactly, and he was very sympathetic. Whether that will translate into the actual political will, but this is something very important for people to know. When we met with the Prime Minister, he's like, well, I can't do anything about this. It's provincial attorneys general who are in charge of enforcing the law. And that we put squarely onto David Eby's desk. And we said, look, this is your government. You guys are in charge of how laws are enforced. You cannot let people step across the law, impede progress, violate people's rights, and not have a strong stand. Now, we're waiting for there to be greater translation of that idea into action, including the encampment at UBC, which is violating many, many bylaws. So we're waiting to see. We're putting a plan on his desk. We're trying to get him to reestablish a sense of control here. I should also just point out, the community response has been unbelievable.
I was going to ask you, so besides the Jewish community, tell me more. What's happened that surprised you or unexpected? Yeah.
A neighbor of ours came to us and he said, I'll watch your building at 2 a.m. I'll sit in front of your building. He happened to be a part of the auxiliary of the Vancouver Police Department, but he said, I would do that. And we have some evidence. We do occasional market research here in Vancouver through the Jewish community. And we know that there's actually much stronger support for us than you would glean scrolling through TikTok. We've received unsolicited donations. We didn't want to turn this into let's make this into a fundraising campaign, but we've received unsolicited donations, and we did put it on our page because people are turning to us. They want to know what to do. So on our webpage, I think we put an announcement that if you wanted to donate to our security, because we're going to be spending that money, it's not dishonest, and people really genuinely want to do things. I even have a neighbor who just brought over challah because she said, I don't know what else to do for you, but I know Jews give food. So
tell me about the indigenous support. I read and saw some visit that you were in where you had indigenous people coming to share solidarity. What was that? Tell me about that.
It's a very unique group. It's a group of international indigenous, some from here from BC, some from New Zealand. They established an embassy in Jerusalem. There are people who can go back 10,000 years, but they recognize that there's 4,000 years of Jewish history indigenous to the Hare Yehuda, Yerushalayim, the mountains of Judah, the Shomron, etc. And it was interesting. They said, we define indigenous by, can you go back generations, and can you identify specific cities or lands that you come from? And this is something I feel is very timely. It's Parshat Bamidbar, right? We do genealogy to the point of delaying Kiddush for because they're very long parshiot with all of the genealogy. But that's something that's very important. It's very important throughout the books of the Bible and through our literature as well, through our tefillot. So they recognize that. It was a very interesting thing. So one of the things I find most specious about this whole conflict is that Palestinian representatives, if you read, Ismail Khalidi, I think, he talks about the fact that it's painful for him that people don't recognize that Palestinians have been around for a long time. But there's this patent refusal to recognize that Jews do not see themselves as Khazars. We do not see ourselves as weird European invaders. And I don't know a single Jew who does not have the sense that his or her ancestors were Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, and also,
and the women,
Rabbi Akiva and Yochanan ben Zakkai, etc. And we have a very, very long and inseverable connection to the land of Israel. And at some point, if somebody would just recognize that, that's part of the problem. Is the moment they open up a crack to that part of the narrative, the entire thing falls apart.
Right. Let's go back a little bit to your own personal training. You come from a long line, famous great-grandfather, Yosele Rosenblatt, you've got Caruso of cantors.
Yes.
And I didn't ask you to sing, but the training that you had to deal with anti-Semitism like this, how blindsided have you been since this happened? I mean, what
absolutely.
do you know how to do? How do you do this?
That's okay. Let's start with where I grew up. I grew up in Baltimore, in Pikesville. Hard to find non-Jews in Pikesville. So I grew up in the golden age of Judaism, Jewish community, and the first time I ever encountered overt anti-Semitism, this is how naive I was. I was wearing a kippah sruga, a knit yarmulke, on the subway in Paris, and somebody spit on me. I was like shocked. Now, I think now I know more about Paris.
So how do you do this as the leader of a Vancouver community where they haven't dealt with this before?
I would say I'm fortunate here because we have good resources here in Vancouver. Our CJA representatives, Federation, we work together. The truth of the matter is I hate anti-Semitism. To me is like, it's the worst issue. There's no growth in it, right? It's just about other people's problems. And you get thrust into the victim culture of the victim Olympics of our society. It's corrosive and it's tempting, right? It's like the refined sugar of the rabbinic diet. It's really, you can spend all day on it. People love it. You can rile them up, but it doesn't really help you with the inherent connections, the things that really are the shining lights of what Torah, Jewish community, mitzvot are about. And so I find it myself not really wanting to go into this too much. And I don't want this to be my trumpet.
Okay, so what are you hearing from your parishioners? Are they afraid to come to shul?
The message we put out was, we're coming to shul and we're coming back bigger. And I had about 5 times as many people on Friday night for service as I typically do. And then Shabbat morning, it was a bar mitzvah, so it wasn't exactly a fair test. But I would say we had 3-4 times the normal crowd. So we've been open for business. I haven't heard a single person say, I'm not willing to come back. People are willing to sign up for security duty and all sorts of things. I think people here are ready to stand up and not let other people intimidate them. That's the general response that I've gotten here. And an interesting question, one of the questions we haven't dealt with as a board is, are we going to clean up the doors and leave no remnants of it? Are we going to keep it as a memorial? That we haven't figured out yet. We're doing a little bit of research about how it's happened in the past. The truth of the matter is, and I really feel like it's important for Canadians, for the polite, silent center of Canada, to raise its voice and just say, this is not what our country is about. and we're not going to tolerate this. And we want our elected officials to police the broken windows, so to speak, to make sure that these kinds of things don't happen.
How much of the synagogue had to pay for security before this happened out of your own pocket? Are you able to say?
I can say better across the community because I've heard the statistic. The community as a whole spends $100,000 a month. So we could fund a whole other school. We could fund a second Jewish family services program just on the security budget. I mean, is that crazy? What we're wasting for that?
Some people have said that it's a tax that the Jews are paying for their own security.
We haven't hired off-duty police officers, which would be a charge, but we do get support from VPD without charge.
Okay, so you're paying for private security.
Private security.
Understood.
We installed a new system, better cameras, more pixels, more locations.
Before this happened.
Yes. Lucky him.
But it didn't prevent it. So this is what I'm saying. People need to understand that these are not going to prevent. It's only going to help catch.
I do think people should know that the Vancouver Police Department told me that they have identified people by gait analysis. The way you walk is a unique feature, and given enough time and given enough ability to sort, that will be a unique identifier. So I'm saying that now because I hope that also helps to prevent the next person from considering doing it. But you're right. We can install more lights. We can install more devices. It's a cat and mouse game, right? Security looks like a wasted expense until you have an event and then you feel like you didn't spend enough. Just to give you an example, 2 years ago, we put in some decorative boulders to ensure that we didn't have a car ramming. So, we've been doing a lot of these things, which are, as a Jewish organization, you always want to balance between being inviting and being secure. So we're trying to strike that balance because, as I'm sure you know, in Toronto, it's not always easy to get the Jews to come into the synagogue.
You're the latest, although there was another one after you, vandalism in Kitchener-Waterloo just a couple of days ago. Have you heard from other rabbis? Are you consulting with other rabbis to give you advice, or have you heard from people like that?
I've heard from many, many rabbis, many, many colleagues, support, concern, not really strategy, in terms of security.
Or not just security, in terms of, how to go forward, what to do next, how to get through this.
Yeah, I mean,
lessons they learned.
The things we're more worried about the universities and the public education system and how kids are going to be educated here. I think that honestly, that's a much more pernicious threat. The exclusion of, I don't know if you saw that last week, the Writers Guild excluded all these Jews. The Vancouver Comic Festival had to make this big public apology. They're just going to figure out other ways to exclude. And this is going to happen in history and archaeology and social science and
the Runner, the play council a couple of times. Yeah. In different places.
Exactly.
BC,
so there will be a number of them that just, this is like Spain, 1391. At a certain point, you just give up and you bend the knee to the other side. And I think that's really what we rabbis are more worried about. That's what we talk about is, where are we sending our kids to university? How are we going to educate them? How are we going to deal with the public school system? Those are really, I think, higher on our concern list than security cameras and fences and things like that.
And Vancouver's growing. You're investing millions in a new community center and the J West program, and Oak Street is right there. It's around the corner from you, where Holocaust Museum and a new school, and you're growing.
This is the great challenge of Jewish community, is that people are very concrete. They love buildings. They donate well to buildings. We feel like buildings are progress, but the education is a much more important in the long run. That's really where we win and lose the battle. From the ultra-Orthodox to the modern Orthodox, it's very hard to get rabbis, teachers out here, qualified people, the people who are going to inspire the next generation. Even in the economic structure, the cost of actually making a living as a teacher in a world where living Jewishly probably costs upwards of $300,000, $350,000 a year. I hate to say it. It's hard to cut it on a Rebbe's salary. It's hard to cut it on an educator's salary. It's hard to cut it on certainly a rabbi of a small synagogue. It's hard to cut it. Rabbis of large synagogues, they're okay, and people get attracted to them. But those rabbis need They need youth directors. They need NCSY rabbis. They need associate rabbis. And the idea these days that one rabbi can do it for a congregation of 500 doesn't work that way anymore. And that's really where our community has to start to recalibrate its sense of investment. The HR assets, it's got to be the Sid and Goldie Cohen youth rabbi, not the Sid and Goldie Cohen auditorium.
Thank you very much for being on the CJN Daily.
My pleasure.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. On Friday, June 14th, the Orthodox Beth Tefilah congregation in London became the 10th Canadian synagogue to be attacked since October 7th. Somebody threw a rock at the front door and it broke one of the glass windows. Damage was estimated at $150. The synagogue says the window has since been fixed and they too are reviewing their security needs. Meanwhile, London police are investigating. In May, the federal government passed its new budget that contained promises to significantly increase the amount of money available for security funding, but also to streamline the whole application process. Right now, you have to pay for half the project yourself, and Ottawa will refund the rest, up to $100,000 if you're approved. And that makes it tough for many small congregations and schools to afford. The CJN Daily is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and our music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening to the CJN Daily.
Y'all remember that joke from Airplane? The old lady asked for some light reading.
How about this leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends?
But in actuality, that's changing. Jews are crushing it in sports around the world, and we are here to celebrate them.
Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout.
Zach Hyman, his first career hat trick. 41 points for Diddy Avdia. It's Sue Bird's building.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jamie.
We love Jews and we love sports, but most of all, we love kvelling over Jews in sports.
Together we host Menschwarmers, the longest running Jewish sports podcast in the world. Listen and subscribe at thecjn.ca and wherever you find your podcasts.